It's time, all of the pastries are gone, so we might as well sit down and hear a talk. A couple of things before we begin. Welcome to Saturday Matters. We have here in the audience another University District history expert, Antoinette. I'm sorry, I don't know your last name. First name basis, she's on the waiting list here, and she wrote a book about the history of the University of Washington. So,
welcome.
I'll
be happy to come talk about it.
She's not here to be a fact checker. We're sure that Fred's information is solid. And also, Judy Sterry has asked for a couple of minutes to make an announcement about our dear late former neighbor, Lenore Shapiro.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As you may know, Lenore wrote 14 short stories that we read during Myron's reading, and I'm having them published, and I want you to see what the form is. This is what it's going to be. Phyllis wants to have several copies that will be in our library, and then they're going to be sent to the other Era Living quarters. So people who have requested a copy, this is what it's going to look like, and it's going to have this kind of backing on it. And think about it, because we're all of an age where we're going to die soon. So what are you going to do with them? So since we're going to have a number of copies, don't feel that you have to take another copy, because they'll be here. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Is that silence?
Yes, I did. Hear from Fred, the third and final part about this really fascinating history and old vintage photos.
Well, welcome to the third in this series. I did hand out some significant dates that we have been alluding to as we've gone through much of this. But what we have covered so far in the first talk, we talked about the University of Washington and the shaky start it had prior to being located in what was then downtown Seattle, still is. But we also looked at the role of Edmund Meany in being able to work with the state legislature after we became a state, and getting the university located at the interlocking location between Lake Union and Lake Washington. Second in importance to the university district after the university moving into that area was the locating of the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition in 1909. That brought something like 3.75 million people to visit the University of Washington campus. It was an incredible opportunity for a young university to be able to show what was there and what the potential was to people coming into the area from outside, and also showing the area off in the park-like atmosphere that was generated for that exposition, so that the university district became something special. And shortly after the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition, people began moving out into the university district and into the areas just beyond it. Businesses started to relocate and found their way into the university district as well. The digging of the ship canal was another major influence that affected the nature of the university district. The bridges that were built were enabling people to either come by streetcar over to the university district Or in the early 1920s, there were automobiles, and the University Bay Bridge was a significant mechanism over which people came into the area so that they could travel there, decide what they wanted to do. So I'm going to talk about, in the beginning, a period of very rapid growth at in the University District. This could be handled in a number of different ways, but I think what I will do is simply tell you at the beginning about the period from about 1920 to 1930. Buildings that were erected during this period included 11 major campus buildings, the stadium being one of the first ones, the Suzzallo Library in 1926, the Edmondson Pavilion in 1928. At the same time, apartment buildings were being built in the University District in a large number. 20 of those were large apartment buildings. The Wilsonian apartment building in 1922, the Commodore in 1925, the Washington Manor in 26, the Duchess in 27, the Malloy in 1928, and the Park Vista in 1928. On October 8, 1925, the University Herald estimated that there were 100 apartment buildings in the University District. This is an amazing number. Roosevelt High School was built in 1922. More buildings were erected in 1920 to 1930. 5 major church buildings. Blessed Sacrament, 1925, University Baptist in 1925, University Lutheran in 1927, University Methodist in 1927, University Christian in 1928. This is just an indication of the change in the population that was coming into the University District. They needed some place for their religious services, and many were built to accommodate the people who were living there. A number of sororities and fraternities houses were built during this time. The Neptune Theater in 1921, the Egyptian Theater in 1925, and then a large number of business buildings, including the College Center building in 1927, and the 8-story Brooklyn building in 1929. Now, the people who lived in the University District felt that the university should have a new name. They said it should be called University. The community had been known as the University District for 30 years, ever since the University of Washington moved out of downtown in 1895. It had been a fine name in the early days, but now the community was mature, successful, and urbane. A name containing the word district was too limiting and too simple. The area had developed so much, and now, with an abundance of talented people and a campus recently crowned as with a magnificent new library, it was ready to go to new heights. The name University proclaimed to all that the university community's pride in the vast array of goods and services it provided entitled it to be called a city within a city. In fact, the Marine State Bank used that name in its ads, and often found it in the University Herald, which was the newspaper that served in this district for some time. Now, I want you to hold that thought about university. We'll come back to it so that you can express an opinion. I'm going to start by looking at the stadium, and we'll follow a little bit of the development there. In the early days, the athletic events were held on upper campus in Denny Field. And this is a picture of the east side of Denny Field on the campus in 1919. If we look the other way, here it is on the west side. And it's just showing a football game that's taking place there. But that was the end of playing on the upper campus. The Husky Stadium was built in 1919. And as you see here, they are digging down to have the football field located there. They've already put in some bleachers so that people could see what was going on. The Husky Stadium opened in November 27th, 1920. And at that time, they also had the first football game down there, and that was playing Dartmouth, and the UW won 7-6. What you see in this picture is just a bit of the look out across Lake Washington from where the stadium was going to be built. You can see a little bit on the side of some of the areas where there are seats over there and seats on this side. But you're looking at what will become the university stadium. This next one shows the university stadium in 1920, and you can see that there is parking available nearby. You can see where some of the stadium is, and you can see that the center of this space provides enough room for a good football game. Now, this next one, I want you to take a look at. The university stadium was intended always that it would be used both for university and civic purposes. And one of the first non-university uses was the production of the Wayfarer. This was a religious pageant expected to take its place beside the Passion play of Obermammergau. This Wayfarer was written by the Reverend David James Prothier, then minister of the University Methodist Temple. The Wayfarer featured the Reverend Dr. Cleveland Kleinbauer, then pastor of the University Christian Church, as the interlocutor with his stentorian voice. There were no PA systems at that time, so they needed somebody that could really project out there. The producers followed the popular custom of resorting to superlatives and built the world's largest stage to accommodate 5,000 performers. The stadium was too big at the opening night on July of 1921. Although it was estimated that 10,000 people were present. Later, the stadium was too small for the crowds, and many felt fortunate to simply stand up for the 3 hours to watch the play. It was the most impressive spectacle in the Northwest that had ever been produced. 7 performances were put on in 1921, 6 in 1922, and 6 in 1925. The 3 productions earned $75,000 for the stadium. Why was so successful a production then not continued? And we're not quite sure why that happened. It could be that the main people involved had moved on to other areas. But the stadium certainly has been the site of some very interesting projects like this one. If we would look at the next page, this shows the stadium that was used and the parking area or the seating areas around it for the Wayfarer. And this is when President Warren G. Harding visited the Wayfarer as one of the things that he wanted to do. The University of Washington had 4 different presidents that had come by, either for the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition or for some things like to view the Wayfarer, so that what other university in the country would have had 4 different presidents visit in a short period of time? And what other university would have had a program sited on their campus that would bring in 3 3/4 million people? This generated a lot of interest in what was going on at the university, and certainly the university benefited from it, and they continued to work on building the Husky Stadium. Now, if we look at this picture of the Husky Stadium, this is a much more recent one. It was voted as one of the most scenic stadiums in college football. Husky Stadium is the home of the University of Washington football team. Husky Stadium was constructed in 1920 and opened in 1927 with a capacity of 30,000 people. Over the past century, Husky Stadium has undergone many renovations and expansions. Between 1936 and 1950, 25,000 seats were added to Husky Stadium at a cost of over $1.7 million. In 1968, an additional 3,000 seats were added. Also, the grass playing field was removed and replaced with AstroTurf, leading the Huskies to become the first collegiate team ever to have an AstroTurf field. In 1987, a $13 million renovation project was completed at Husky Stadium that included increasing the seating capacity to 72,500. And in 1990, a new 8-lane synthetic surface track was installed. And prior to the start of the 2000 season, the AstroTurf was replaced with field turf. In December 2006, the University of Washington unveiled plans for a major renovation project in Husky Stadium. This was a $280 million project. So that it began after the 2011 season and included the demolition of the entire stadium except for the upper deck on the north side. A new lower deck was constructed in the horseshoe shape around the gridiron, with a new upper deck built on the south side of the stadium. New bleachers were constructed on the east side of Husky Stadium. It also included in this project was a new press box with addition of luxury suites, removing the track and lowering the field 4 feet, and a new 31.2 foot high and 100 foot wide high definition video scoreboard was installed. The stadium was closed throughout the 2012 season as the Huskies played at CenturyLink Field, then the home of the Seahawks, and returned to Husky Stadium in August of 2013. The seating capacity in the stadium actually decreased to just over 70,000, that fans attending the football games in Husky Stadium received excellent views of downtown Seattle, Mount Rainier, the Olympic Mountain Range, and Union Bay and Lake Union. That's a rather remarkable change over time. The stadium has served many purposes, but certainly we have taken great pride in what has happened with the stadium and our athletic programs as a result. Well, now let's go back and look at some of those things that were happening in the district at the same time. We mentioned that there were a lot of apartment buildings that were built in the 1920s. Here's the Wilsonian Apartment Hotel that was completed in 1922. Still exists. The Malloy Apartments on 15th Avenue Northeast near 45th, Northeast 45th Street in 1928. Here's the Edmund Meany Hotel that was completed in, I think, around 1930. And this isn't a very good picture of it, but any of you who have been in the hotel or have looked at it, every room has a corner window so that you can look at 180 degrees from your room out through the district. The important thing about the Edmund Meany Hotel was that this became the primary place for organizations to meet. And they had a number of such organizations that met there, many of them weekly, many of them monthly. But these included some of the following. Well, the University Chamber of Commerce, the Campus Business and Professional Women's Club, the Seroptimists Women's Club, Seroptis International, Seattle North Incorporated, technically, the University Lions Club, which I have been a member for over 50 years, University Kiwanis Club, University Rotary Club. There weren't other places that they could meet comfortably in the university district, so they met there. Now, what's the importance of that? These clubs were made up of some representatives from the faculty at the University of Washington. It was made up of business leaders. It was made up of professionals. It made up of residents who lived in the area. The Lions Club that I belonged to was well over 130 people when I was in the club. We met every week at the Meany Hotel. This gave an opportunity for people from the community and people from the university to talk to each other, get to know each other, and understand what was going on in the district and what was going on at the university. So it became a good place of exchanging information. One of our members was Bruce Maines, who was the head of the Safeco Insurance building. He would come to the meetings. You'd have ample opportunity to talk about things that were going on there. And this is true of each one of the clubs that I have mentioned here, so that what was happening in the university district was being appreciated and respected by members at the university and by others within the community. Well, let's look at some this is an interesting series of pictures that I'll show you at this point. This just happened to be the University Baptist Church on the corner, the southwest corner of 45th and Brooklyn. You all know that we talked about the area was originally going to be called Brooklyn. But it turned out that after it had the university there, it became known as the University District by most. This corner that the church was on becomes a popular corner, I think, because this was torn down. This just picture was showing this during the big show of snow in 1916. Following on this, the Brooklyn building will be built, the Safeco Tower will be built, and so on. Before either of those happened, here's a building that stood on that same corner from 1923 to 1929. It was a transfer and storage building, but it only existed for a short period of time until it was torn down and the Brooklyn building was erected. In 1929 by the General Insurance Company. Actually, the General Insurance Company was renamed the General Insurance Building in 1936. And it was raised to make way for the Safeco Tower, which was dedicated in 1973. So here in that one corner, there were several buildings that existed there. But it was a rather major event in the history of the University District. In 1936, when the General Insurance Company, later named Safeco, Insurance Company of America, bought the Brooklyn building on the southwest corner of Northeast 45th Street and Brooklyn Avenue Northeast. They used it for their headquarters and renamed it then the General Insurance Building. The company became the largest private employer in the district. By 1980, it had 1,900 staff members in the head office and a total of 10,000 employees in the US and Canada. It was also represented by 20,000 agents, insurance agents, in 6,000 independent insurance agencies. This was just a huge company to have their major headquarters in the University District. And it only served to help other businesses that wanted to move in the area to feel like this was a good place for business. Bruce Maines, that I mentioned earlier, he served on many different boards. They had the University District Roundtable. They had the Seattle Roundtable, made up of business leaders in each of these areas. And having somebody with Bruce's intelligence and good, solid perspectives there was very helpful. And it was helpful to the University District to have somebody who was helping to communicate back and forth among what was going on downtown and what was happening out here in the University District. This next picture, this is the Safeco Tower. It's also now the University of Washington Tower. The Safeco Tower housed all of those people that I just mentioned with the Safeco company. They had a parking garage that was several stories high right nearby because they had a need for that. But the two buildings that stood out in the University District for many years were the Safeco Tower and the Edmund Meany Hotel, because they were the only two large buildings in the area. If you've driven down there in the last day or two, you would know that it looks like they've got skyscrapers coming up by the bunch. So the University District is just changing so much as time is moving on. Well, let's talk about a couple of the other things that happened early. In 1921, the Neptune Theater was built. And some of you, I think, Karen may have something to say about either the Neptune Theater or the Egyptian Theater that opened in 1925. But both of these became important to the university because it gave places where people could have some entertainment, and it was helpful. I think I showed you these next.
Okay, you want to see looking north?
Yes, looking north.
Chimes, yeah.
These, we had mentioned the Chimes Tower on the University of Washington. This was in late 1913 or early 1914. The old water tower was there. It later became the Chimes Tower. I mentioned it only because of this next picture. This is a picture looking out into the area of the university that had, this was where the fraternities and sororities were being built. And this is early in that process, but if you drive down there today on 19th or 20th, you will see many of the fraternity houses and sororities that are located there. Now I want to show you some pictures that simply pick out little bits and pieces of what we could see at different times in the long history of the University District. Here's one taken in the 1920s, and you can see that the streetcar that is there is an electric streetcar hooked into the wires up ahead. But having a streetcar running right down 45th, it was going to make it very difficult for cars to be able to park along the sides and so on, because it took up to the center of the street pretty much. The next picture I'm going to show you is, this was a picture of the campus back in 1919. This would be Denny Hall. This would be Barrington Hall. And right back here would be the Chem Shack. What I wanted to point out is that the university bookstore used to be in the Chem Shack and was there for several years before they moved to where they were on the Ave. The next picture would show the university bookstore moved to the Ave, and this was in the 43rd block of the Ave. And that's where it was in 1925. It later then moved one block north to its current location, which would be in the 4400 block of University Avenue. But this has been the case with several of the stores. They have been in one location and moved as the need for it arose. Okay, this next picture is just simply looking at east from 45th. If you were standing on the corner of Brooklyn and 45th and looking east, you would be looking where the street would rise up a little bit. And you'll see that here in 1918, they still had one of those streetcars that was serving in that area. But it would look a little different in terms of the buildings that were there at that time. The next one, I put this in for Joe. I think, Joe, is this correct, Joe? Where are you?
Yeah,
Your old neighborhood.
All right.
Stentorian boys.
That was a park that they used for a good long time. Now here's one looking west on 45th Street from Brooklyn Avenue in about 1940. Notice the telephone poles and all of the changes that have taken place in terms of how they are able to get the electricity into the various buildings. Also, the cars are a little different in 1940. This next one, they took up the streetcar tracks when they were able to get the electric streetcars out there. So that this is just a picture of where they were ripping up the streetcar tracks in the early 1940s. And you'll see that we've got trackless trolleys that began operation in the district on August 11th, 1940. And with these, they look very much like our buses today that are moving through the area that have the electric power.
Brad, it's interesting that that's number 7. That's the same route now.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the old number 7.
Yeah, all right. There you go. Here is looking north on University Way after the streetcar tracks were removed in the 40s. And notice that the cars are now parked along the side, and you can get them there in large numbers, but there's more room on the street now that the streetcars are not moving, are not being required there. This corner would be where Porter and Jensen Jewelers were for years, right on 45th and University Avenue. Okay, I put in 2 of the aerial views. The first, and I can't see an awful lot here, except on this one you could certainly get a good feel for where the university football stadium is. Notice the golf course down here, and it actually would have been extended over here as well. The golf course existed. It was a 9-hole golf course, but there were many people at the university that apparently enjoyed golf, and they had this built in there. What you don't see is back here, where you would expect to see the University Medical School, the complex all associated with that. And of course that didn't exist in those days. So that has changed dramatically over the years. And probably Kay might have some comment to make later about that area because of the development of the Child Development Center and all that went on down there at that time. Her father was very instrumental in seeing that change take place. Okay, this is just an aerial view of the campus in 1938, and it's down before the viaduct was developed to drive down 45th Street toward Laurelhurst. It hadn't yet been built in 1938. But you get a feeling that the campus has grown a little bit by this point. This is the next 2 pictures are simply showing the change in the 45th and University Way. That's where a lot of the pictures that I've been showing have been taken. So this would have been a streetcar just in front of where the Porter and Jensen jewelry store would have been. If you wanted to compare that with this one, this was the exact same view, but taken in 1915. And you can see that it has changed rather dramatically over that period of time. Another little snippet. This is from the University Bay Bridge after it was remodeled in 1933. And that was to make it high enough so that the boats could get under the university bridge. This was a celebration on the opening of that bridge. The cars were delighted to have a new way of getting back and forth from downtown on into the University District. This is the Martin and Ekman's men's clothier that moved into this building, which is on the southwest corner of 45th and University Avenue. They enjoyed living there for a period of time, but then it became Pier 1 Imports, and it has changed again, I think, from that point. Here's a drawing of how some of the planners thought that there was a way that the University District that could develop that would essentially provide an opportunity for having streets that were blocked off for just on-street parking, or on-street little stores that you could simply wander down through the area. This is kind of similar to what happens, I suppose, during the street fair. It isn't quite as nice as what they had in mind when they drew this, but
Street fair is much more crowded too.
yes, the street fair is a lot more crowded. But now let's go back, and I want to ask you the question. We've shown some of the things that have been happening in the University District that have caused the University District to grow, both in terms of a business community, in terms of a service community, in terms of a relationship with the university, and the interactions stemming from that. Should it be called University? How many of you would have preferred University District? How many of you would have voted for University? Thank you. And that's about the way it got turned down. But it was interesting that the concept of University has maintained. The Lions Club that I was talking about had commissioned a book on the development of the University District. And what's it called? University. Well, there are a couple of other things that I thought we could mention before we just open it up for some comments. I think many of the people that attended the university had dealt with the problems of world wars, of the Korean War, of the Vietnam War. And this is a picture that simply shows what happened on May 5th, 1970, when President Odegaard didn't comply with the student demands that they made after the Kent State University shooting. Thousands of students marched in protest from the UW campus down I-5 to downtown Seattle. The I-5 was blocked up for probably 30 miles. And the students, by the thousands, had participated in this as a way of expressing their strong opposition to what had been done. Yes?
How would he have complied with student demands?
What was
How
the
would he
demand?
have complied?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what his rationale was, but I assume that they were wanting him to make some changes in terms of how the university was responding to the shootings. And I'm sure that from an administrative standpoint, he was trying to keep a positive attitude, but
Well,
Probably some of you who were there.
right.
the campus was closed down after this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Classes were suspended, and the campus was basically closed down after this.
Yeah.
Yes.
There were bad times.
There were loads of people besides students in the freeway march. There were loads of people besides
Oh,
students.
yes.
Yeah, including me.
But it was, there were many students involved, however.
One other thing that happened, I was in the crowd in front of the hub. It's the only time in my life that I looked up at the undergraduate library and there were armed soldiers, looking down at us. I remember the administration building, the president's office was, it was taken over. It was almost like anarchy. And it was, when you were like early 20s, it was a hell of a lot of fun.
John has a comment.
I was also one who marched in that group. But question I have is, you've referred to the Ave several times. And that's the more common, I'm surprised the book wasn't entitled The Ave.
Yes,
Should have been.
It could have been.
I'm all for the L.
Okay, let me show you just a couple more pictures and then we'll open it back up. Oh, go ahead.
Wasn't that when Odegaard invited the student representatives to come to his office?
Yes.
I think so.
And that's what stopped him. Yeah, and made Odegaard really famous.
I wasn't here at the time, but
Neither was I. I missed that.
okay, let's take a quick peek at what the university looks like today. As you can see, it has grown substantially from the time that we started these talks looking at one little building downtown. And now then, it has grown tremendously into a major university. I thought you might be interested in looking at what the enrollments have been like over the years. This would show you some of the growth patterns that took place at the university. I think I've left off 1940 in here, but when we get to 1980, you can see that it has grown substantially. If we looked at the enrollment today, there are 60,808 students enrolled across 3 different campuses. 42,616 are undergraduate and 17,465 are pursuing graduate or professional degrees. And we have a number of international students enrolled, as you can see, across the 3 campuses. So that the growth has been substantial. I think that the interaction between the university and the community has been terrific over the years. And I thought I would stop by presenting this picture to you and giving you a bit of the history that it represents. The University of Washington is known for its stunning cherry blossoms that bloom every year, attracting thousands of visitors. The cherry trees at the UW were a gift from the government of Japan to the city of Seattle in 1912. As a symbol of goodwill and friendship, the trees were initially planted at Washington Park Arboretum, but in 1939 the university requested that 31 cherry trees be planted on campus near the quad. Today, the quad is the home to around 29 Yoshino cherry trees and 9 Akabono cherry trees. The cherry blossom trees at UW have become a beloved part of the university's landscape and history. They are not only beautiful, but they are also significant in their cultural and historic meaning. Cherry blossom trees are a symbol of spring and renewal in Japanese culture, and they are often associated with the transient and fragile nature of life. The blooming of the cherry trees is a time for reflection and appreciation of the fleeting beauty of nature. And the best time to see the cherry blossoms at the UW is typically in late March or early April. Usually occurs when students are on spring break, which I've always thought strange. Anyway, during the peak blossom, the quad is transformed into a pink and white wonderland with petals falling like snow. It's a magical sight that is not to be missed. So I thought we would end with a positive look at the cherry trees as a way of seeing what has happened. But
In the last lecture, you talked about the Olmsteds as being the designers.
oh yes,
And I presume that as much as possible on the campus, they tried to maintain their design. Though crowding all those buildings in, it must be tough. But one comment I wanted to make in particular is that the mall in Washington, D.C. was also designed by the Olmsteds.
yes.
And just like the cherry trees here, Washington, D.C. has its cherry trees that are on the mall, come from Japan at around the same time. And they bloom in the springtime, just the same, and they have a festival and everything. So, but yeah, I think you have to thank the Olmsteds for creating green spaces like the quad here. In Washington, D.C., the mall was created by the Olmsteds. They literally took the train station out from in front of the Capitol and moved it back. And among other things. And also they paid attention to the history in the sense that the reason the Lincoln Memorial is where it is that it's where the Memorial Bridge to what had been Confederate land in Virginia connects the North and the South. But I guess my question is, do you know anything about particular efforts to keep the Olmsted plan more or less in place?
Well, I think they have helped the university a great deal, but the original plan, it has been followed, I think, to the best that they can, even while having to fill in parts of the campus from where their original plan had.
Okay, Lowell and Henry.
Fred, thanks for a great look at the history of a great university. I have trouble picturing a football field on upper campus because I can't picture any place that's flat. Can you help me with that?
I'm not sure exactly where that was on upper campus, but it was, I assume maybe down
Must be where Red
below the
Square is.
quad
That's
a
the
little
thing.
bit, maybe.
No, where was it?
Behind Denny Hall.
Yes, what I was thinking.
Oh, where
It's
the
called
quad
Denny
is?
Field. It was behind
Where the
Denny.
quad is now?
It was behind Denny Hall.
Behind Denny Hall.
There's a very small remnant, but they're building dorms there. And buildings. It's flat.
Because Denny Hall is the highest point on campus.
Okay.
So you're talking about by the dorms, like Henderson Hall?
No, the brand new ones.
Oh, I don't know where those,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Take over.
Henry, go on.
Yeah, I would imagine that upper campus field would have been up by what they call, upper campus, where they call a quad in that area.
Yeah.
Quad would be in that area.
Yes, but one of the things, not everything went smoothly as far as the various constructions of the Husky Stadium. If you remember, they were building the upper deck and then things fell down. Yeah. What year was that?
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was in the
remember
late
what year it
70s.
happened.
Yeah,
Late 80s.
That was when the athletic director said that, a lot of the alumni were wanting to have seats on the 50-yard line. He said they can now get a seat right on the 50-yard line.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you remember when it fell down? I
I
don't
think
remember.
I think it was in the late 70s because I drove by it just about when it had finished collapsing. It was at night. I was coming home from a class or something, and I looked at it. I thought, that doesn't look right. There's something weird about that.
It was
Yeah,
the reason that I'm Antoinette Wills, and I arrived in Seattle in September 1970 after all those protests were finished and everybody was exhausted. And I started graduate school, and I got a PhD in history, and I never left. So I worked at the University of Washington for 33 years and was a staff writer. And so I remember when that stadium collapsed because I was organizing an event. It was the late 80s. So
What year was it?
I think whoever said 1987 was right.
87?
Oh, it seemed to me it was earlier.
Well, let's, anybody got their phone?
John had a
Yeah, I was also here, usually swimming every day, walking on the Burt Gilman Trail, and was watching that second stadium piece go up. And interestingly, they put up all the vertical pieces with very little cross pieces. And it didn't take a genius to know that's not going to work well.
I can't believe university growth has become asymptotic. Where do you see the university moving, both in terms of geography and in terms of function over the next decade or two? Where can they go? Is the space all filled? Are they going to have to go off campus, or what's going to happen? I know you can't predict the future, but try anyhow.
Right, I don't know how I would answer that other than to say the other campus sites like Tacoma and Bonneville, I think will develop a bit as well.
If you
They
go
could
back,
take up part of the load.
if you go back to your campus map, you can see what's used to be off campus is now campus.
Yeah, right.
I think there's a possibility that many universities are going to become ghost universities like we used to have ghost towns. Because there's going to be so much online education, and in some cases becoming very effective.
Oh,
Good point.
Interesting.
So here's the Husky Stadium collapse. February 25, 1987.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Good thing somebody said, look in your phone.
Following Al's comment about it becoming a ghost university, I'm wondering how many of the classrooms and spaces are actually fully being used during the academic year, and how many have been vacated, particularly since COVID.
Interesting question. Eric.
Trees removed from the proposed alignment of the R.H. Thompson Expressway and planted here.
I think that's correct.
It's too early.
Well, tell us about the R.H. Thompson Expressway then.
Streets are moved at 31.
I don't know much about it. How about you?
Well, there's the,
Well, it was just before my,
there's the exit
the
ramp
R.H.
to
Thompson
nowhere.
was just before my time at the university, but imagine a major freeway going through what is now the Arboretum.
Yep.
Yes.
A couple of points on the 1970 era. We lived just east of the freeway, and I remember in the summer of '69 or '70, we heard a big boom, and there had been an explosion in the administration building.
Yeah.
And also, I had come directly from Japan to go to law school in 1968. I'd been away from the country for 3 years. I showed up with an attaché case and a suit, and I thought I'd landed in Mars. And they think I came from Mars.
Eric?
Tutorial comment. And that is that exponential growth cannot continue forever.
I'll accept that.
How many people actually attended the actually attended the University of Washington?
Oh my God.
Yeah, quite a lot.
How many people taught there?
Yeah, how many people worked there? Faculty or staff? It's almost the same number. I also work there. Okay, many thanks to Fred. We love this. Our next week is Jerry Garvey, and he's going to go see the film Oppenheimer. I'm scheduled to go see it this week, and he's going to talk about It Wasn't All Oppenheimer.
Wasn't all Oppenheimer.
Yeah, it wasn't all. Yeah, the other stuff that you won't see in the movie, you mean? Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye.